I mean, Warlock's just a god class. I'll go over what I think are the worst things and like the things that need the most attention by them because I think it's important I bring that up. But I think most classes are in a really good spot, dude. I mentioned this on Twitter yesterday, and I truly believe this number. Like 90% plus of the actual design, theoretical design elements of the tree alone, of the trees in the game, are like great. Not good, they're great. And or if you would make the argument like, no, there's still like this one little minor tiny problem, or even like more than minor, the tuning phase of this alone, which they'll be doing for the next 2 months, could fix that problem alone. You know, a lot of people when they're looking at talent selections, they might be like, dude, well, you have to do this because you never even consider this. Well, what if they make this just 3 times better? And then that you could make that to every single other thing in the tree because like they have to kind of be at the same level, right? So there's so much that is going to be solved by this. And honestly, Blizzard would be wasting their time spending way more time just shifting one talent up or down a row than they will actually just getting into the bones of when you realistically pick these and making sure they're balanced against each other. But if I can just kind of talk about some of the things I think are good and bad right now, I'll just briefly go over every class. Don't take this super seriously. This is more like just top of my head where I see, and I'll just take dungeons out of this entirely. I'll just see how a lot of these classes look in raid right now and like what their potential value could be and like what their design of their tree is like. And we'll start with Death Knight. Death Knight is really controversial. So I saw a post today and I've been saying for a while that like their solution to having DKs have like a spot in the raid outside of grips was through Insidious Chill, which is basically Curse of Weakness, because previously they had removed Curse of Weakness, or it was not in the talent tree and it wasn't baseline. Starting today, Curse of Weakness is now baseline for Warlocks and Dragonflight. So now, the only bit of things you could have said to have DKs feel like they really have a spot and have something unique is now gone, which as a DK player feels really bad. AMZ was over-nerfed. This was just replaced by something else. Now, that's like the bad part of DK. The good part of DK is they'll be way more insane at grips per DK than they've ever been before. They have Death's Echo, which is easy to obtain, and they have A-Bomb's Limb, and that is available all the time. They also have great damage profiles. Like if you, and I think I heard Atlas say that he doesn't think they're like too fun, but I'm not going to worry about the fun part because I know that like fun can change based on tuning. Like tuning involves things like your runic power generation and spending ability, right? So like really hard to give an idea on that yet. But if you look at like DPS DK at least, I think they have so much possible range just theoretically design-wise in the expansion. They have a great breath build that they haven't had before with Ice Cap and then multiple Pillar of Frost buffing abilities. They have the ability to do great passive like cleave in a group, similar to like an old Fury Warrior kind of, with even not even focusing on it, but also burst AoE. They have an Obliteration Ice Cap two-handed build that gave them a runic power spending AoE ability for outside of breath builds. They gave them probably some of the best 2-target in the game. Certainly the best 2-target, one of the best 2-target burst, but I think even sustained Frost 2-target will be excellent with Chill Streak and 2-target Cleave Coldheart. Like damage profile-wise, if you combine that with Unholy DK being, even without tuning, just theoretically, I mean, Unholy DK burst is going to be obscene. It's going to be obscene. Gargoyle, Army, just fat as fuck with Lust, potentially a strong PI target. They have the ability to funnel off of a bunch of ads to get a bunch of Festermite to burst a boss. They have something that maybe isn't great on every boss, but on a specific execute phase, they made their execute even better. I don't know, man. They, oh yeah, Blit Cleave in D&D for Frost. If you just look at what DK is available to do and how much range they have as a DPS spec, between Unholy and Frost, they might check more boxes than like any other 2 specs in the game. Like they can kind of just do it all. So it's very likely that DK will be a powerful enough damage bringer on its own, but obviously it's really scary to kind of be sitting there waiting for tuning. So just moving on from DK, again, I'm not really going to speak about many tank stuff, but yeah, so moving on, I actually want to talk about 2 other classes in a row first, or after DK, because they're going to kind of be relevant here in a second. And I want to touch a little bit on what Ian said, just in terms of Death Knight, Shamans, and Hunters, because I kind of brought up to him that last expansion was about half the classes in the game had a guaranteed raid spot due to something. And that's basically just means they have a lot of value. And I was like, now it's 10 out of 13. And those last 3 classes are feeling it that they don't really have enough value to be brought. And I don't think it needs to be, and he agreed that it doesn't need to be an hour-long raid buff or something like that. But basically, I had a lot of discourse with dev people around that, and basically the answer I got back, man, I wish I could have it verbatim. Basically, the answer I got back is, we don't think that every class should have to be in on every fight, which, whatever, you know, that's what they said. We just think that classes should have powerful utility that at least, or I think the way they phrased it was, we don't think every class should be in on every boss on a raid fight. We think that throughout a raid, there should be fights where you need to bring certain classes so that no one feels not included. Now, a DK player can tell you right now how bad this feels to be wanted and needed on specific fights and then not used on other ones, for example. But even using that line of thinking, let's look at the classes in the game that currently don't have anything that puts them in raid content. I just want to talk about it very briefly. DK, we just talked about. DK at least does have insane grip ability, and it is like nothing else in the game compares to it. It's really strong, and it puts them in on fights 100%. Using their same line of thinking, DKs do solve that. They do bring something that you cannot bring any other time. Okay? Even though I think they should get more, I think they should buff AMZ, whatever. I think those would be good for the game. But that's something that can happen in the expansion or potentially before the expansion. Let's move on to Hunter and Shaman. Hunters were given something. I'll talk about the pros and cons of Hunter. So currently their BM tree is actually fantastic, and I think BM will be a great spec to play. I hope it's the best tuned spec because I think it just looks better than the other two. The marksman tree still is like kind of whatever, and the survival tree is whatever. But BM is a really interesting spec because if you talk about raid utility, what is like the class people have been talking about bringing to a raid for years when you just need someone to do mechanics because they're that range that is genuine or generally thought to be easier to play and also has full uptime while moving, and they also have, like, you know, nice mobility skills to be able to do mechanics. BM Hunter. You guys are all saying BM Hunter. I'm also hovering over it, so it would be obvious, but everyone knows this if you've played WoW. It's like people are often wrong about this because they think it's like just by far the easiest spec in the game. That's actually not true, but it is certainly has elements to make it easier, like not having to like worry about casting and standing still and stuff like that. And their rotation has become mechanically more difficult over time than like the mop days of just actually hitting Bestial Wrath on cooldown and Kill Command on cooldown. I guess you had the frenzy stacks there, like that yellow button, but yeah, you get what I mean. What is the downside of bringing BM Hunter into raid? Well, typically their single target has not been like top tier, but even mid-tier single target for a class that can do that is a good raid spot because there's not a lot of classes that can do it when those mechanics are needed. Also, it's been their defensiveness. Hunters kind of just died. In this expansion, I think they gave them enough tools to not be dead. You know, like, I'm not going to go over what they are, but like they have now, for the first time ever, have you been able to have a mechanic doer guy? I'm not talking about like super high-end play where you can make this work with it. I'm just talking about like your average raid. Like, this is the first time, I think in ever, but in a really long time at least, that there has been Mechanic Doer X class that is also tanky, has like a turtle that you can move around in, has a great designed tree, and also you could mention Sentinel Owl. Honestly, here's how I think Sentinel Owl is going to work. You're going to use Sentinel Owl early and often in progression on damage reduction that you think will help you or anyone in your party. You're just going to slam it on CD. Short duration, make sure you're alive for the next thing. And then as progression goes on, you'll start putting it on parts of the fight that are very, very important to like live, right? So this is nice. You'll like kind of move it around and do it, but honestly, it's weak enough to almost be considered a personal in a raid. And mainly speaking of the DR component, you could put yourself in the healer group and give them leech during like a cooldown set or something, but it's like, you know, whatever. So like all of that involved, I see BM being like a good enough spec that like outside of not being tuned at the very, very bottom or something is going to be like a solid class to bring to your raid. So again, going on like Blizzard's idea of, we don't think that every class should be on every fight, but we think that, you know, there should be a fight in every raid where you feel like you need a class, and the idea would be like, you're okay that you're playing a DK on this fight, so you're more geared for the one that matters or whatever, you know, whatever. That like moves away from Hunter. Again, Marksman's identity seems to be kind of gone a little bit, still really, really weird situation, and then Survival's like a more deterministic way to get bombs, and then it's kind of its own thing, whatever. But just with BM alone, I think BM is probably the brightest spot for Hunter, theoretical design-wise, for the first time in a while, even though they did not give them the WoD raid buff selection with your pets like we all wanted, aspect of the Fox, which I still think could be considered. I think Aspect of the Fox has slowly become one of the most overrated abilities that had previously been in the game or been removed. It was available in High Mall, which I think we got like a decent rank in High Mall, like world top 10 or something or close before we went hard. And I don't remember like Aspect of the Fox ever. Like it was not like a major part of our decision making at all. It's a 8-second duration, 3-minute cooldown. 6-second duration, 3-minute cooldown. It was literally just because of P1 Blackhand that it was like this thing you needed and couldn't go without. And it was new, so it's possible you could have made it better in High Mall. Like I think it's overall a pretty high power ability, but it's absolutely not this like insane broken thing that you would always have 4 of in a raid. That's just not true. And if that is the case, you could increase the cooldown or something, but it's actually cool utility. I wish they would bring that back because I don't even think it would guarantee a spot. It would just be nice to have. So that's like basically my thoughts on Hunter. I don't think Hunter is in as bad a situation as the class I'm about to talk about, though. Shaman, one of the classes that has been praised for having an insane tree. I think there's a lot of things about their trees that are really good. This isn't really about the trees. It's that outside of Wind Fury Totem, which I'm going to kind of leave alone because it's one spec. Resto and Ellie can't bring Wind Fury Totem. That would be the same if you're going to make that argument that they need to be in all the time, which is a decent one. It's a really powerful thing with most raid comps, but only one spec can bring it. That would be like saying, like, oh, Paladins have something that brings them in all the time, but only Holy Paladins have Devotion Aura, not the other ones. It would be like, okay, well, then Paladin doesn't really have something that puts them in the raid. It's just kind of Holy. And then it's a whole other conversation that, like, Holy is a much more valuable version to bring up that raid buff than the other two, but we'll talk about that later. Someone tell me, using, again, I gave an argument where you could still, again, using Blizzard's philosophy that they said, not arguing my own, just using theirs. You can make the argument that you would, at least one time in a raid tier, you would want a DK in your group. So it'd be nice to have one, and they're going to get invited to groups because you need one for this boss. We already spoke about how people don't like that. Whatever, just forget it. That exists, 100%. I think there's scenarios like that for Hunter. Again, BM, I think that line is there. I understand that they want more, but at least just using their philosophy, I could see it. I could see BM being like just a fucking excellent class to have one of in a raid. Okay. And again, kind of the same issue as Shaman where it doesn't include the other two specs. I'm not looking past that. Let's look at Shaman. Outside of Wind Fury, someone tell me when you will need to bring Elemental or Resto Shaman to a raid boss in a tier. There's one very obvious answer here, but there's literally 2 bosses this entire expansion where you needed it. Spirit Link Totem. Spirit Link Totem, very, very powerful. Super good, super necessary on certain fights. Specifically 2 fights in Castle Nathria that neither of them needed it. Well, okay, you definitely needed it on Progression Stone Legion, but you didn't need it on Hungering. It was just very good. But dude, since then, when have you needed Spirit Link? This entire expansion, two entire raids since then. You cannot make an argument where you needed Spirit Link whatsoever, where you needed to have a Shaman in the raid. That is not true. Don't say Wind Rush. It can be brought through Roar. We're talking unique utility, okay? But even then, you're kind of right, because Resto Shaman, there are scenarios when you'd want Ancestral Protection Totem too. And this is also the first time as a Resto Shaman that you've been able to bring APT and Vigor at the same time. It's sick. This class is making moves. Like, they're gonna do shit for sure. Like, this class is gonna be good. I think Wind Fury is more potent all the time than Spirit Link and APT. Obviously, from what you've seen people bring. Someone tell me what Ellie does. You guys think they have sick funnel? Now this could be fixed with tuning. I do want to bring up before you guys answer the question. I have been saying that Ellie has like excellent design and a bunch of different abilities and like, you know, different builds they can go. This is actually not true because of a recent change they made. They nerfed the fuck out of Earthquake, and it kind of killed the spec. Ellie now is like single target, feast or famine kind of spec. And I think Blizzard did this on accident, and I hope when they look at tuning, they fix this. They actually did the exact same mistake at the beginning of Shadowlands, where at Shadowlands, do you guys remember when they buffed Earthquake by like 80% and they buffed Earth Shock by 30% or something like that? And then basically the class was just great for the rest of the expansion. They basically undid that nerf with a recent nerf. They just need to redo it again. Because what they added to their tree was a bunch of really fucking sick resource gaining abilities. All this like funnel, flame shock shit on the right. You got like multiple charges of Stormkeeper. You have Swelling Maelstrom. You have all this like Maelstrom increasing or like higher cap Maelstrom things. Okay, you know what makes Maelstrom generating things feel really good and are really good? Your resource spenders doing damage. So by nerfing their spenders, they made all of this shit not matter at all. So hopefully they look at this again, because like Ellie, design-wise, again, they're getting into the tuning phase, even though Ellie is one of the very few classes that have actually already received tuning, even though the tuning was negative. Design-wise, they have so much range. They are insane. They have like fucking super long Ascendance burn phases. Deeply rooted elements is insane. They have like the whole funnel arc here in the bottom right with flame shock shit. They have, you know, whatever, a bunch of other, like double charge of Stormkeeper, great burst AoE. They have it all, man. They're super tanky. They fucked up the tuning on them recently to where their spenders aren't good enough. But regardless of that, let's assume they fix that with tuning. Someone tell me when the fuck you need an Ellie Shaman on the fight. I just gave you an example where you'd need something from Hunter and DK, which is the only classes in the entire game that do not have something that puts them in on every single fight, by the way. Someone tell me what the fuck Ellie does. Thunderstorm, Blast Wave, High Explosive Trap. You don't need Thunderstorm. What else? Tremor Totem, other Shaman specs have it. Poison Cleansing Totem, other Shaman specs have it. Ancestral Guidance, not super powerful. Actually, one of the best. Actually, Ellie has a good Ancestral Guidance, but are you bringing Ancestral Guidance? No. They're completely and totally dependent on tuning. And history tells us that that isn't good enough. Because Ellie has been tuned very well and has been very good for the bosses in the last two raids, Sepulcher and Sanctum. Ellie was genuinely insane. They were like one of the very best DPS classes in both of those raids. And Shadowlands is an expansion where you have more agency to bring classes that you want. Here is basically, this is what they want in Dragonflight. Here's what's likely or whatever. Here is what it is currently in Dragonflight. And here was Shadowlands. So in an expansion where you had this much opportunity to bring things that you didn't 100% need, Shaman was an excellent class, but just got outclassed because it didn't have an immunity, or it just didn't have the same value that another class brings, right? A raid spot that people often assume Ellie Shaman are competing with is actually Hunters, mainly because they have like male and a lot of Hunters play Shaman and vice versa, whatever. Okay, the class they're really competing with is Moonkin. And every Moonkin you bring past the first is not required, but imagine this, seriously. And this is not super high-end play. This 100% applies to like even heroic teams. If you're recruiting someone in the group finder, why would you bring your first Ellie Shaman over a second Moonkin? Moonkins are tanky. They're not as tanky as Shamans, but they're close. But they just bring a damage niche that no one else can do in Starfall, which they're just now making better. This is not the updated tree. Starfall is the same it was in last expansion, except you can now spend and you can dump more Astral Power into it. But they also bring Innervate, Nature's Vigil, Heart of the Wild, and a Roar every 60 seconds per Druid. Like what is a shaman, like how is a shaman expected to like it's not about like, and this is usually where people misunderstand the point. This is not, man, I like, you know, at a super high level when you're like picking, like, you know, you're picking small things. This is not a small thing. The value that one class brings to a raid absolutely windmill dunks what another one brings. Not a raid, a group. Just a group. And not at the highest level either. Again, reading their article, which again, I've said they've done an amazing job. And I agree that they should move on to tuning before thinking about design again. But when you think about design again, I would really, really think about what DK's Shamans and Hunters are going to be like in the first patch of this expansion. Same logic could be applied to Shadow. Very true. Shadow's in a very weird spot, though. Okay, let's forget about Shadow Priest, the class tree, or Spec tree, sorry, Spec tree. Public actually released some thoughts on this today. Can maybe read those later. But I understand that Shadow's like in the midst of like a little bit of a rework, but also like it's really, really not in the right spot. But again, I'm willing to wait on Shadow. You want to know why? They're talking about tuning. You know what tuning is? Tuning these abilities against each other. Currently, big issue with Shadow is that, yes, while this choice node design-wise seems great, where you have a 2-minute big Void Eruption, or you have something that gives you more range like Dark Ascension based on the content, these things are not tuned right now. Currently, I think they made Void Bolt like not extend your dots currently, and like they removed the damage increase from Void Eruption. That's a tuning thing. They will literally just look at those two things against each other and look at how Shadow Priest compares to other classes and make these great or good or whatever, or nerf them. I don't know. Like that whole thing has yet to happen. Like, so I'm not super worried about the actual Spec tree, but think about bringing a Shadow Priest to raid. This kind of goes back to the issue with PI. I think Shadow Priest as not necessary as they are to your raid, because you're more likely going to bring your priest spot to bring a barrier instead, because it's just, again, talking about value, it's just way more valuable, and disc is in a very good spot. Dude, Shadow Priest is going to be one of the most stackable classes in the game, and it's because of the Wind Fury effect. It's because of this. It's because of twins. I've done this a few times, but just to do it again, like looking at Warcraft log statistics, like Shadow Priest is like historically done pretty good single target. So when you look at a boss like Skolex, okay, forget the fact that Shadow Priest is actually at the top. And I promise this will confuse people by knowing this. This is completely irrelevant. Okay, in your mind, Shadow Priest is going to be in the middle. All right, forget about it. All right, but look at Enhance. This is the Enhance effect. Enhance adds in a regular like other 4 melee group about 2 to 4%, I think, on average to every single melee that's with them. So pick any 4 strong melee here, add 2 to 4% of their damage, and then look how much the enhancements bar grows based on how much added raid damage they're giving you. The exact same thing is going to be the case with Shadow Priest next expansion. If Shadow Priest is anywhere near the middle of the pack on whatever single target boss exists next expansion, and you just add the fact that they're getting twins for free in their kit, if they're not like bottom tier damage, they're going to be a class that brings you the most overall raid DPS to bring more of them into your raid. But it's not going to feel really good, but it's kind of there. Like that's the Shadow Priest bit, is like when you're looking at those last few spots in the raid you want to bring and you're thinking about pure damage, this brings a lot of value. So, but then at the same time, they're getting a raid spot because of PI. But then you could make the same argument if you're mad about that. Then other classes are getting their raid spot because they have a raid buff. What's the difference? So I'm not too worried about Shadow at the moment. And I know we've had a lot of great conversations with Shadow Priest. I'm not doom and gloom on Shadow. I think this class, while they've moved around a lot of things, and yes, I think the idle capstones are a little uninspiring design-wise, but I actually really like this choice node. And I think the tuning, I think the fact that they're going into the tuning phase will fix the issue. Again, you hope that these things are like a more compelling choice or they're powerful enough to be selected. Going over the rest of the Power Word Go Fuck Yourself post they did to Priest, where they basically responded to their post and they responded to the feedback that they got for that post. They didn't mention Vault to the Heavens. Honestly, I like the idea of Vault to the Heavens, but that's not something where they should take 2 weeks off of the tuning cycle, pushing tuning back just to like kind of decide whether they want Vault to the Heavens. Maybe they'll add it later in the expansion, whatever, but it's not the end of the world that it's not there. It's whatever. So just moving on to some other classes, though. Again, I'm going to kind of leave off of Vengeance. I think Havoc is in a great spot design-wise. Their tree doesn't feel amazing, but if you look at like how Havoc is going to play next expansion, when they actually get around to tuning some of this stuff at the bottom, I think they have a ton of options. I'm okay with the placement of their tree. If you look at the talent you would be giving up for Netherwalk, it doesn't feel that bad. But I think this is something that I don't think this is going to change for the expansion right now. I don't think they're giving you Netherwalk for free. They're going to have to make you choose for it, and you're going to have to lose something. And it's usually not something at the bottom, it's something up here. I think design-wise, again, a lot of people are like looking at like, oh, well, design, you're in meta all the time now. They haven't done tuning yet. How long you're in meta from Demonic is tuning. Demonic versus Demonic Origins is tuning. The whole tuning thing that is going to change these trees so much has not happened yet. And again, outside of some minor pathing issues, I think Havoc is fine. Like I think this class is actually potentially in a better design spot than it's been in a long time. Where the class tree is here, they did remove Blur from Vengeance. That's definitely a topic for conversation. However, I want to wait until Mythic Plus and Raid to kind of speak about Vengeance, because they also got the new Frailty system and they like gave them some better stuff. Again, I don't think their class tree is super interesting, but again, we're at the point coming up to the expansion where like that's not the most important thing in the world, and they don't have time to do that really. So I'm just hoping Vengeance is strong. You're just gonna have to see what it looks like in dungeons without Blur. But just to speak very quickly about Blur, they're already getting stun, and they're getting like souls from stun, which is good. They're getting darkness, they're getting the hunt. Vengeance is still like in a better gameplay way than I think they've been previously, and I think Blur is probably too strong, and removing it outside of like just increasing its cooldown for Vengeance, I think. I was actually thinking about it more because like people were comparing it to Die by the Sword. Die by the Sword was like a 3 or 2 minute cooldown, I forget which one it was, and it was 100% parry and a DR, but the DR wasn't relevant because you're parrying, you're using it in a parry, you're using it for the parry, not the DR in almost all scenarios as a tank, especially in dungeons. And like, what's the difference between 100% parry and 50% dodge? Both of those things mean, barring something unbelievable happening, you're alive. Like, you having 50% dodge plus a 20% DR, you're just alive. It doesn't matter what health you're at, by the way, you heal a ton. You're not dead at all. And it's on a 1 minute cooldown. In my opinion, Blur clears Die by the Sword pound for pound as a tank cooldown. I think it's actually even better. So them removing blur, I feel like maybe it wasn't necessary. I just don't think it could have stayed at the 1 minute version with its current power level without like changing the tooltip of it or increasing its cooldown at all. It was way too good. So maybe could have brought it back as like a higher cooldown or something, but I'm okay with that generally. Druid. Feral, again, I don't really know where their tree stands, but I love the fact that one of the best thing that these talent trees did is they allowed the devs to look at classes that have been kind of fallen to the wayside design-wise for a long time. And I mean, Feral Druid might have been the worst design class in the game. They turned a bleed-focused, excellent class, very unique, into like basically just like a shitty assassination rogue, where they were just Ferocious Bite was in Venom, it was all your damage. You kept up Rip like Rupture, except it extended itself. And you kept up Garrote like Rake, and it was just the same spec, and it was super boring. And they actually made it so much better. I think this is one of the best things they've done in the expansion. Feral looks insanely fun to play, and again, once it gets a tuning cycle, I don't know exactly fully about like how compelling the choices are at the bottom, but again, that is what tuning is for. I've heard nothing but good things from Feral Druids about this, and as an OG Feral main, I'm very excited to see the class go back to its roots. Guardian is one of the few specs that I think has had very little to no innovation since it was first released. I think this one, while they said they're still doing some minor stuff, I think Druid was clearly like the last thing on their pipeline to change. So I think the last few things you might see after the Moonkin tree is you will see a Druid class tree revamp or at least 3-point node reduction. And I think Guardian Druid could get some love. But I don't think this will happen until after a little bit of Mythic Plus and raid testing happens. But I think this is... Once they're like comfortable with the tuning aspect of this, I think this is one of the first things that's going to get looked at. Mages were generally really happy with everything, basically. Like Arcane, they wanted to like move a few things around, but generally speaking, like Arcane is like a better version than it is now. Frost, more recent thing, there's a couple of these nodes you didn't really select, but like upon the most recent changes, again, you have to like pick Blizzard to get Cold Snap, just some design stuff. But like the spec is a better version than what Frost is now. Fire is definitely a better version of what Fire is now. The main point of contention is making sure that Feel the Burn or Blaster Master or whatever it is, this expansion is 5 seconds instead of 3, or making it only happen in Combustion again if you have to have that happen to get 5. But it's very cool that it's outside of Combustion. But largely, they're happy with this. The main thing that mages want, and I think this is a fucking sick idea, the bottom of the class tree is kind of weak design-wise. Their idea was make the capstones defensives. So all 3 specs of Mage can get any 2 of Greater Invis, Cold Snap, or Cauterize. I think this is an excellent idea. I think most of the time you're going to pick Cauterize plus X, but I think you would actually have a very strong split between when you play Greater Invis and Cold Snap, honestly. They kind of serve different purposes, so that would be really cool. Here's the thing, that's not going to happen. This is the whole, like, if you want to know anything from this post they made, that is not happening. There's no way they're completely remaking the bottom of the Mage class tree. This is going live very close to this. And it's also unlikely something they're going to do in Dragonflight patches even, because it's just too much of an overhaul. But I think mages in general, again, knowing that all classes are now majorly focused on tuning these abilities, I think it's in an excellent spot. I think mage is in a great spot. Monk. Start with Windwalker. Again, really hard to look at the monk class tree. There's just some really like kindergarten level mistakes. Like for how good they made some of these trees, even within the monk spec, to see them continually be behind the whole like role being behind Soothing Mist has absolutely no logic to it whatsoever. I'm not super upset about having to grab Disable to get Fortifying Brew. Honestly, monks are gaining power by getting both Diffuse and Dampen. They're also giving them raid utility by giving basically only Mistweavers and Windwalkers 4% leech and avoidance, just because tanks will have much less uptime of this. But outside of that, the bottom of the class tree is super uninspired. I understand where they went, but this whole like bottom 3 capstone thing feels like shit signed all monk players. Doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel right. Again, at this point, that's not getting changed. That is life. That's reality. Let's think about spec trees. I think the monk trees fucking slap ass. I think they're insane. I think they're so fucking good. Like the Windwalkers are like peak complainers. I think a lot of this will get solved by tuning, because like currently, obviously, Fist of Fury was really bad this expansion, and they fixed it with a tier set. And then obviously you're looking at these without tier sets. So forget the number stuff because they're about to do tuning. The actual options you have that enhance your gameplay, fucking nut. Would I rather see Weapons of Order than Feline Stomp? Yes. They've heard that feedback. They didn't change it. How do I feel about Bone Dust Brew? I don't know, but I don't like really hate it. People feel the way they do about Dance of Chi-Ji, but I fucking love the idea. Like Windwalker single target sounds unbelievable to me. It sounds so fun. You have Ascension, Power Strikes. You're getting Open Palm Strikes back from BFA. You're getting Glory of the Dawn. Fucking nuts. You get, you know, Storm, Earth, and Fire. You get Drinking Horn cover, which works with either one of these. This is one of the most fun things to play. Generally speaking, talents that increase the duration of your cooldowns or reduce the cooldown of your CD, those are like super, super fun. You get both, right? For the first time ever, you're actually going to be able to have Whirling Dragon Punch, potentially Serenity and Spiritual Focus that works with both. So you have like way more range. They gave you Strike of the Windlord. You got fucking all this shit. You got Fury of Zwen. You got Zwen's Battle Gear. You got Transfer the Power. You got Invoker's Delight back. You just have all the sauce, man. And then on top of that, my low-key favorite thing they did was force you to path through Jade Ignition for single target. I think this is something very underrated and brilliant that they did. Dance of Chi-Ji has a lot of bad opinions on it. Not like bad opinions like people are wrong. Like people don't like the way Dance of Chi-Ji works. Most of that is to do with AoE and the RNG of your damage pull to pull based on just the proc is just too strong. You know when Dance of Chi-Ji fucking slaps? When you use it rotationally on single target. Seriously, a monk single target rotation with Dance of Chi-Ji added instead of boring ass hit combo is fucking awesome. Like it makes it so much more fun. And they basically built that into your single target kit where Jade Ignition is going to make it so like your Dance of Chi-Ji procs have a lot more value, and it also gives you a little bit of AoE burst AoE things you could save this for, even in a single target scenario where you're waiting on a set of ads to spawn. And also, just without going too deep into Windwalker to kind of move on, the one issue they've had for the longest time on Windwalker is it's been impossible to balance them. I'll forget PvP. It's been impossible to balance them in raids because they were so potent in Mythic Plus when you started adding mobs, or even in raid fights when you added mobs. See Soul Render when that first came out, even when they were overall bad in that raid. But they had no way to figure it out. In this expansion, these talent trees have allowed them to balance Windwalker in single target and in AoE at the same time. I didn't like fully figure this out yet, but just like go over the stuff at the bottom. Like if you actually want this stuff at the bottom here, you get Fury of Zwen, Zwen's Battle Gear, you get like all your single target shit. You know, you're just fucking out here just slapping. You got Last Emperor's Capacitor, all the Zwen points, you got this. But like the thing is in the past, you had all this. It's like, how the fuck can you make them do good single target while still doing AoE? Well, the reality is you have to swap points over into Mark of the Crane. You have to go grab Crane Vortex or Bone Dust and these points. But by spending those points, you're actually removing the things that make you good at single target. So because of these trees alone, they've allowed themselves to fix the problem they've had for like 4 years now, where they're either the best class in the game or it's impossible to tune them. And the talent points alone allow them to do that. I'm so happy with this tree. Single target Windwalker Monk alone sounds like one of the most fun things I've ever experienced. And the only way it would be better is if they gave you the option to have Weapons of Order as well. But even then, it's just an absolute fucking insane design. This tree is like a masterpiece in my opinion. Moving on to Brewmaster, again, rotationally made Monk way better from what I'm hearing. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but design-wise good. They're not gaining too much, but they were also super, super strong. And then obviously they gained some stuff through the class tree. Heard very good things from Mistweavers. I know they were upset that Instant Vivify got nerfed every 10 seconds, but honestly it had to be. But it gives them a little bit more of a spot healing element, and they have some crazy out-of-control Nyalotha haste corruption tier situations of just really, really powerful, just putting out a bunch of renewing mists and ways to heal people a lot. And I think that's doubling down on what they want that healer to be like. Like they're not a spot healer at all, and they're kind of just letting them be raid heal owners. I think monks are in like a very good spot. Their class tree, again, bottom of it feels like shit. I get it. Does not feel super interesting. And specifically this point is like irredeemably bad that it's here and not somewhere else. But monks design-wise are great, and they are ready for the tuning phase, straight up, compared to other classes. Paladin gets a little weird. I'm going to not talk about Holy because I actually have not spoken to our Holy Paladins yet, and I'll probably do that. Actually, oh, well, this is getting weird. I probably should have done our Holy Pally talk before now, because now we're at the point where I'm probably not going to be talking about classes, strengths, or weaknesses at all, especially with our raiders, because we're actually at the point where we're preparing and seeing them on raid fights, and we're not going to share any of that information. But I don't know where our Holy's at, but I know that they're not super happy about it. I'm just going to move on from this. I have no idea where Holy's at. Actually, dude, I kind of don't know where Paladin's at all. I'm just going to skip this. I don't know about Paladin, but I'm going to guess from people in chat that Paladins do not feel great about the design of their specs. Just as a general thing. But yeah, moving on. Rogue. Okay. Just from when I talked to rogues last, we talked about like where their trees are and like the stuff. I think rogues by and large are ready for tuning. Big time. And that a lot of that is the bottom of this tree. People are like, man, you have to like, they made the path. This is not the current updated tree. I think this is coming in next build, the one where you can kind of path back to the middle here. This is not the updated one. But like, people are just like, man, you never pick Echoing Reverman, or you never pick Thistle Tea. You want to know why? Stuff isn't tuned. Tuning phase means making these buttons that are less attractive more feasible, and that alone can make class trees and spec trees way, way better. I know I've said it 100 times, but people really, really do not think like that. Restless Crew still not implemented. So that's just so funny. This is one of the first things they announced in beta at all, in alpha, and it's still not in the game. So yeah, they still have a few 3-point nodes. Apparently, word from the day, he actually said this in my channel, the 3-point nodes are intentional and they're not changing them. I don't think this is nearly as big of an issue because it's near the bottom of the tree and they serve a specific purpose. If you fill out an assassination tree, their reasoning for doing this is very obvious. Again, I'm just randomly selecting things. Don't put any weight into what I'm picking. Their reason for doing this is so you can't pick 2 capstone nodes. They only want you to get 1. And the reason why, and again, I don't know if this is the best reason, is because Kingsbane and Dragon Tempered Blades would have some like crazy interactions. This basically says every time you apply a lethal poison to a target affected by Kingsbane, Kingsbane damage increases by 15%. And then Dragon Tempered Blades allows, what's up? Wrong talent in all caps, world first rate. Oh, you're doing the meme. Oh, it's specific. Okay, sorry. You can get 2, but it's only Kingsbane and this one. You can get 2, but you can't get Kingsbane in the middle one because they made it a little harder to get. They've made Poison Bomb 2 points for this reason, and it's because of this interaction. But honestly, okay, again, this is not going to get fixed in a tuning thing. I think that's like kind of a lame cop-out, to be honest with you. It'd make this a bit more interesting by just having more points, and you could just make these a choice node or make them not interact. Like, I don't know. I think it's lame that they did all this because of that, and it's the only tree in the game after the Druid update that will have 3-point nodes at all. But either way, I think I'm really happy with Rogue in general. I think all 3 specs, when receiving tuning, seem very fun to play and will have their niche, and they made an excellent choice node in the class tree where not only does the first rogue get guaranteed to be brought to raid with a trophic poison, no question about it, the second rogue that gets brought to the raid is not just bringing a redundant buff, they gave them an option to bring something else as well. I think they're the only class in the game that has, like, I mean, numbing poison and trophic poison are not the same level of power in PvE, but numbing poison is not nothing, and it stacks with Curse of Weakness, which is interesting. If numbing poison stacks with Curse of Weakness, which has now been brought back to the game, does that mean that Curse of Weakness, numbing poison, and DK's thing all stack? There's no way, right? I'm pretty sure there's no way. Well, they don't. Okay, you guys are saying 5 minutes between boss melees. That's obviously not, it's not additive. Like, currently this works on live. Like, numbing poison and Curse of Weakness both work at the same time. Okay, moving on. We talked about Shaman. Let's talk about Warlock. Warlock, I mean, Warlock's just a god class. I don't know if their trees are like super, super insane, but the Warlocks in general, throughout me talking to them, were happy about this. Through their 3 specs, they have had the ability to like do basically every type of damage at the highest level. They're constantly tuned well, and that's not like an RNG slot machine thing where it's like, oh, well, you know, like, I guess it's their time. No, like, the people who tune Warlock at Blizzard are just better than people who tune other classes or whatever. I don't know exactly why they do it, but there's a ridiculous statistic someone made of like class time spent since Mist of Pandaria with one of your DPS specs being above the average. And Warlock was like 95%, and the next closest was like 60. Like, that, it's absurd. It's actually insane. And then, yeah, Warlock here. Warlock's turbo broken. I'm sure there's some stuff that's less interesting, but like, they're going to get tuned, man. Tuning is going to change these trees a lot. If you're going to look at like how these trees affect you at the beginning of the expansion, the design process that has happened until right now and is kind of slowing down a lot is probably 60% of these trees being interesting and good. It's definitely more important because, you know, you can only tune stuff so much. Design's very important. But the tuning part could massively change the way you look at these trees. We kind of talked about Warriors already. Prot Warriors, even after the nerf, are in such a good spot compared to previous expansions. Their tree is awesome. Fury still has this weird shit on the left with single-minded Fury that like kind of plagues their tree, but it's a powerful spec. Arms has a great tree. They've made a lot of good changes. Just in general for Warriors, the change to Signet and having it be a choice node is so powerful. And then we already talked about the Shockwave thing at the beginning of this, so I won't reiterate it. But Warriors are absolutely in a good spot for tuning. There's just no... They got Juggernaut back. They're probably going to be Execute Kings again. I think the only class in the game that's going to beat an Executing Warrior is an Unholy DK with Lust and all of their CDs. And it's like only... like I think a 3-minute long plus Execute phase Again, we haven't even done damage testing yet, but just by design only. Or warrior DPS is going to beat every class in the game, and prot warrior is going to beat every other tank DPS in the game, assuming you can actually execute, which they gave you a lot more tools to be able to do that. But I think if an execute phase is like 2 minutes or a minute and a half with Lust, I think Unholy Decay might win just because of their burst window and because they have some innate like execute. Obviously they have Soul Reaper and they have Reaping, but I mean, like, I just think they're just going to do so much damage in their burst that they might win. If there's Funnel and Execute, then Arcane wins. Nope. If there's Funnel and Execute, then Unholy wins. I'm pretty sure Unholy will gain more single target from Funnel than every class in the game because it's the same thing as the Reaping season in BFA, except they made it extremely easy to do. But they also capped how much Festermite stacks, so yeah. Also, small note, this is not, I don't want to spend too much time thinking about this because I kind of want to answer some questions from you all. And I understand this is going to make some DKs mad. I think Festermite should work like Iron Fur. I've played a ton of Unholy Decay. I love Unholy Decay. I played it that entire Reaping season. I love it. I get it. I understand it's like a min-max thing to like make sure that your window is perfect, but I think it's actually bad design. And here's why. Because while, yes, it's fun to min-max it, there are scenarios when you know a pull is coming up and you have wounds on all of your targets exiting a pull when they're all at 20%, and you actually AFK so you don't start your Festermite window. For you guys who don't know how this works, when you pop a Festering Wound, it gives you a 20-second buff, and it starts counting down every second. And then every time you pop a wound during it, it increases your strength by 1%. But it doesn't refresh the duration. So let's just say you're leaving a pull and you accidentally pop a blood. It just starts counting down, and like you could do your burst in the next pull and you would waste all those strength stacks and they'd instantly go away, or you're sitting there AFK. Both options are terrible gameplay. So that's my bit on Festermite. And Iron Fur would work like this. It would basically, every single Festering Wound stack you get from Festermind, or what the fuck did I just say? Every single Festermite stack you get from popping a wound lasts for 20 seconds, then it falls off, and it does overlap, but it's like retroactive, is like the way it works. That's every class in the game, brief like state of where they are right now. But if you took anything away from that, 90% of them are hard chilling and ready for tuning. Seriously, they are. People, and again, I understand, like, I'm looking at it from every class's perspective. I totally get you not really caring about that and being one of the classes I said are in a good spot, and you don't want to be told to, like, that tuning is going to, like, be good or whatever. But, and you're just, you know, you're only looking at your own class and you're just like, man, you know what? This one thing is still just fucking sucks and I hate it. I promise you, man, it's not going to be perfect, but it's really, really fucking good. And they'll fix this throughout the expansion. And tuning alone is going to make these trees so much better. Mark my words, man. 2 months from now, like a week before this thing comes out, remember where we are now with basically no design changes from here until then and just tuning. And I think people's outlook on these trees will be much higher than it is right now. Definitely Shadow. Shadow's probably the class that's going to gain the most from that because their entire toolkit right now doesn't make sense because of tuning alone. Once they do tuning and they actually look at where Shadow Priest is compared to other classes and they look at this choice node, they will see that Void Eruption needs to be, you know, in a way, this node needs to be the Havoc node, right? What this node should be. Demonic versus demonic origins. In a way, a Dark Ascension should be demonic. It should be the shorter cooldown thing that's up all the time. Not all the time, but like more often and like gives you more range. And then like the second one should be Void Form, and it means you pop the fuck off in your 2 minutes. And there are scenarios where you would play each and it's not just a sim thing and you just play the better one. Like there are definitely worlds where you play different ones. Now keep in mind, the Havoc one is not this at all. Currently that's the idea. Again, not tuning, design. That is the exact design of this choice node. Is, do you want a 2 minute meta that pops the fuck off, or do you want to have demonic? Again, with tuning, this demonic origins one will have to be buffed pretty significantly, but presents really interesting opportunities because it could make you better in a burst phase, you know, all those things. All right, questions. Does this mean tuning then tier set previews? I mentioned tier sets earlier. Okay, so I reached out about this. So Blizzard, when they're testing raids, by far the most important thing is making sure the fights work. Now, yes, it is very efficient and it gives them the best possible picture of tuning to see classes and see how they do and see how the tier sets work and stuff like that, but that's a very small part of raid testing. Blizzard does not really view it that way. That's why you're seeing this ahead of time. You're like, yo, I really feel like we should have this. Because in your mind, you remember that. You're like, yo, man, every time I've beta tested before, we've like basically been way more prepared than we are now. That's true. But also in those expansions, they definitely didn't like upheave everything and rebuild it. So like clearly it's a different scenario. Basically the word on the street is I asked about it and they said they can't confirm when tier sets will be coming out, but they said that they've been speaking about it probably more than anything else for the last 2 to 3 weeks internally. To me, that sounds like they're probably going to be out soon. Max Frosty K's extra empowering rune weapon is basically useless. You only get one extra empowering rune weapon during the duration of a boss fight. It really needs either a CD reduction or accelerated cold conduit added to it. Completely agree with you. You're exactly right. Notably, empowering a rune weapon is actually what gets reduced currently by Night Fae fairies, and certainly what will be reduced with Restless Crew in the next expansion. So I guess there's some value in like getting some kind of CDR. But it also could be a tier set angle too. Like Frosty K's tier set could be empowering room weapon base, and it could make sense. No, you're exactly right. I think you're right. If Restless Crew makes it into the game. Yep, my assumption is still that this will not make it into the game, or it will be a very, very insignificant. At this point, do you believe they promised a 2022 release too prematurely and they could benefit from an early 2023 release? I think almost every game that ends up getting released could have been better if you took more time. But WoW is a weird thing where it's not like released and it's like a single player playing experience. It's like constantly being updated. So I think WoW more than other games, it makes sense to release it not when it's fully perfect. That being said, definitely it's impossible to tell. Like, okay, the Shadowlands Doomers were like, yo, this expansion's being released too hastily. It's not going to be ready in time. And you knew this months ago. Really, honestly, the only time you could have genuinely, like, correctly felt that the expansion was not going to be ready in time was like yesterday. That's the only time the dooming could have possibly begun. And because they showed when they released alpha, it was the most complete alpha ever. It was more complete than most betas. Like everything was already there. Outside of like obviously the class trees being constantly designed because that's its own thing. So you're like, man, it was kind of hard to come to the conclusion that this isn't ready because like everything we saw was ready. Like before alpha was even released, the raid was fully constructed. Like, by the way, the bosses in the Dungeon Journal have been so complete. They've been delaying raid testing so much. That shit is, like, complete as fuck. And, like, the only time it felt like it was going to be rushed is this. And, again, the whole rush thing really baits Doomers. Because I think it's very possible through the tuning phase that people are feeling really good about class trees before this expansion comes out. I do not think dooming is good for this situation. But, yeah, I mean, the reality is this. Giant billion-dollar company game, not just Blizzard, but every game is not going to take those extra couple months and miss the Christmas quarter. And like a big part of it is, I mean, this is reality, but you can't blame the devs for that. Like I don't blame the class devs for that. And in the past, it's been okay to question that. There's been some things where it's like, man, these ideas do not seem good. Are they incompetent? Even though I think it's ridiculous to assume someone at a job you've never worked is incompetent, because what the fuck do you know, right? But yo, these class trees and spec trees have showed you that they are not. If given the time, they can make great shit because they are doing that. What yesterday showed you was, you know, those devs wish they had another 3 weeks to tie up this design shit. They're not stupid. They know the job isn't done. And hopefully they'll have more time after tuning to relook at this. They're just announcing a shift in what they're working on, and which that stuff needs to get done too. So part of that does feel bad. I actually feel worse about that than I did Shadowlands. I wasn't a big Shadowlands doomer. I think so many people thought Shadowlands was rushed because of the Covenant decision. They were like, dude, if you just like had a couple more months to figure this out, like no, dude, they were never, Blizzard, no matter when Shadowlands came out, they were never going to release Covenant swappable at the beginning of the expansion. That was not something they needed to play test and figure out. That was a fundamental like philosophy they had about the game, and they were dead wrong. And we knew it, and we told them, and they didn't get it. And they were, no matter when the expansion came out, they were going to have to do 1.5 major patches for them to realize they were wrong. That's just reality. So, yeah, some people just thought Covenants were shit. I actually think Covenants, while swappable, were not shit at all. I actually think they were fine. For, like, if you're putting it up against borrowed power systems, which I'm glad we're out of the borrowed power era now, I mean, I think Covenants, while swappable, is just fine. I'm among the better of them. Yeah, I would definitely not Doom. I don't think there's enough information to doom about anything that's happening for Dragonflight, honestly. I think it's very possible after this tuning phase that this shit's looking really good, because it's already looking so good. And tuning is, and it's really hard to just tell you guys this is the case, because you're going to have to see it. And first of all, if you guys are like ever at the point where you're super depressed about your spec and you just are not vibing with what I'm saying, I respect that. That's fine. If you're just like, I don't trust that they're going to do this, whatever, it's whatever. But like, tuning thing is like almost as important as design. And it makes all these things make sense. Like right now with design, a lot of people like just something this simple. Look at the bottom of this rogue tree. I have no idea what these abilities do, and don't tell me. But let's just assume people are talking about design for the trees, and they're mainly referring to whether you want to go down to get this or that. And you're like, man, I mean, it feels like in all scenarios you're going to do this. What kind of choice do I have? That feels bad. Design isn't good. Well, What happens if this button is just way fucking better or worse, or they make this choice node more compelling, or they buff this or nerf that? Like that actually changes fucking everything. And they haven't even done that like at all to any class. That like majorly changes. Some of these things in the capstone level were already super important abilities, and other things are like row 15 talents that are there for some reason. Those two things have to be balanced against each other. And you won't, like, some abilities you haven't thought about much in the past are going to be fucking insane. So, yeah.